Okay, we will take a look at chapter 8 and chapter 9 tonight. And you should have a copy of the handout here. And the midterm exam is due tonight, yeah? So we'll take a look at chapter 8 and also chapter 9 tonight. Chapter 8 is about the cost and estimation. Chapter 9 is different types of market structures, including the purely competitive market structure, monopoly competitive market, and oligopoly. And probably we discussed this before, that in economics, all costs are opportunity costs. Something you have to give up to get it. But more specifically, in we have it's called explicit costs and implicit costs. So what are the explicit costs? The explicit costs are related to cash outflow. So it involves money outlay. Like if you have paid salaries, you have to write a check, right? When you purchase pay utility, you have basically have to pay a check or cash, right? But implicit cost is different. Implicit cost, it does not involve a cash outflow. It does not involve money outlay. The implicit cost basically is what? The opportunity cost. So if you start a business, and what are the explicit costs you have to take into account if you decide to start your own business? Overhead cost, utility, lease payment, raw material, salaries, wages, salaries, taxes, insurance. And what about the implicit cost? The opportunity cost of your time, right? Because if you start a business, you will not be able to work for other people. And that, in economics, that will be considered as a cost. And how about if you borrow money, if you have, you want to buy a house in Hawaii, $200,000. Well, probably not.
No.
But you decide to pay down cash. You have cash. So there's no additional cost, there's no cost. Right? Am I right? You don't have to pay this mortgage, yeah? No mortgage. Mortgage, insurance. But there is a catch, right? You put down $200,000, you will not be able to use it. You will not be able to earn that 0.1% rate of interest if you leave the money in a checking account. And that will be considered as a cost, but not explicit cost, because it's implicit cost. And economic costs basically are, so the explicit costs are also called accounting costs, and economic cost is the total. Explicit cost plus the implicit cost. So which cost is usually greater? The accounting cost or economic cost? Economic cost is greater because it includes the implicit cost. So which profit is greater? How to compute a profit? Total revenue minus what? The total cost, yeah? Profit is total revenue minus what? The total cost, yeah? Total cost. So if we subtract, or how to compute the accounting profit. Accounting profit will be the difference between what? Total revenue minus the accounting cost. Yeah? The accounting cost. And how about economic profit? The economic profit is what? Total revenue minus what? The economic cost, right? The economic cost. So now which one? So the accounting cost is less than the economic cost, right? So that's why the accounting profit is greater than the economic profit. And what's the we'll first take a look at the short-run cost function. So what's the definition of a short run? How short is short run?
A year.
Less than a year.
Less than a year? That's in finance. That's in finance. And in economics, the short run, the definition of short run is some costs are fixed. So if one cost is fixed, that will be considered as short run. So if you sign a lease for 4 years, and then the lease payment of the capital is fixed, it doesn't matter whether you produce or not, you still have to pay the lease payment. So that would be considered as a constraint. So that would be considered as a short run. Some cost, or at least one cost is fixed. So that's why if you take a look at, usually the cost function is a function of the output you produce. The idea is the more you produce, the higher the cost. But be very careful, we have two costs here. The total fixed cost and total variable cost. Now what is fixed cost? It is fixed. It will not changing or vary with the level of output. And the variable costs are variable, changing with the level of output. So do you have any good examples of fixed cost? It's all relatively speaking, right? Let's say within 1 year period. Any good examples of fixed cost? Rent, leases, yeah.
Utilities.
Utilities, well, depends, right? Insurance, probably. Well, it could change too if you have a major accident, right? But let's say nothing happens, and then probably the insurance will be considered a fixed cost. Commercial spending, usually it's a fixed cost. You know why? The company has a budget, right, for next year, maybe $500,000 for the commercial spending. Usually it's fixed. But if you move to the next year, the level might be different. But within 1 year period, the budget allocation is fixed. So if you produce nothing, which cost is equal to 0? If you produce nothing,
Your variable cost.
your variable cost. In other words, if you produce nothing, this cost is equal to 0. So the total fixed cost is what? Your total cost. In other words, you only have fixed cost if you produce nothing. You don't have the variable cost. But we're more interested in cost per unit. Cost per unit. So if the relationship between the total cost, so the total cost is equal to total fixed cost plus total variable cost. So I can divide quantity output level from both sides. Yeah, from both sides. Now, what is this item? Total cost divided by the output level. So that's the average total cost. And the total fixed cost divided by the output level. So that's the average fixed cost. And total variable cost divided by the output level. That's average variable cost. But the relationship will stay the same. Yeah? The average total cost is the sum of the average fixed cost and the average the variable cost. So the average cost, so we have those average cost. The idea of the concept of average cost is cost per unit, right? Cost per unit. And how about the marginal cost? What's marginal means what? Additional. Additional cost if you produce more. So the marginal cost is basically the changing in total cost versus the changing in total output level. And usually it is basically if you take if you take the total cost, you take the first derivative of total cost with respect to the output level, and this is the marginal cost. This is the margin, the first derivative. That's the marginal cost. Because marginal cost measures what? The change in total cost versus change in output. But the idea of derivative is what? Still changing total cost versus changing in. I can change this d to delta, right? If I want. Delta means changing, right? Changing total cost versus changing output. But if this is a derivative, the change is very small. Very small. That's the concept of derivative. And I have a table here. And so basically, the first column, I have the output level. And the second column is the total cost, total fixed cost. So you can see the total fixed cost is fixed, 60. And I also have the variable cost. Those are given numbers. So given the total fixed cost, the total variable cost, so we can add them together. We get a column 4, which is the average, which is the total cost. So you can tell if you produce nothing, the total cost is the total fixed cost. And then if you accept the first row, yeah? And for all other quantities, we'll be able to calculate what? The marginal cost, the average cost. Average. So for example, this number 27 is what? Average variable cost. So let's find what is the total variable cost. 135 divided by the output level. And how about this 45? 45 is total cost.
90 divided by 2.
That's 90 divided by 2. Yeah, that's 45. Okay. And the last column, marginal cost, in this case is the changing in total cost, or changing total variable cost. So if you pay attention to this column, total cost, so you can see if you produce nothing, the total cost is 60. If you produce 1 unit, the total cost is 80. So you take a difference, that's 20. And you see the 10 here, 15. You can do the same thing for the total variable cost. You will get exactly the same result. Why? Because the fixed cost is fixed. Okay. So the marginal cost basically is the changing in total cost. So we have those numbers in the table, and of course we can also use a graph to show the total cost. So the top one shows the total cost. So start off with the total variable cost. And then if we add what? The fixed cost. Remember the fixed cost is fixed, so we have the total cost. And the second graph, the graph that this chart below, is the average total cost and the average variable cost, and the marginal cost. So you can see the average total cost and the average variable cost, the two costs are U-shaped. U-shaped means what? It starts to decline, touches a minimum point, then starts to increase. That's a U-shape. And remember the marginal cost curve pass through what? The two minimum points of the average total cost and the average variable cost. And I remember I explained why the marginal cost curve passed through the minimum point of the average total cost and also the average variable cost. Maybe I should just repeat quickly. So if this is the average total cost, this is the marginal cost, and the marginal cost will pass through the minimum point of the average total cost. And why? Because you can see on the left side, what happens to, what's the relationship between the average and the marginal? On the left side. Which one is greater? Let's focus on the marginal cost. The marginal cost is less than what? The average total cost. So the marginal cost is less than the average total cost. So if that's the case, what happens to the average total cost? The average total cost will decline. If the marginal cost. Remember I gave you an example before? You take the average midterm exam is 90. Then we have the last student came back from TDY, the additional student. He took the exam, but he didn't have time to prepare. He only scored 5 points. Then what happens to the overall class average? It will decrease, right? Decrease. So on the left side it will decrease. And on the right side, now you can see what's the relationship between margin and average. The marginal cost curve stays above what? The marginal cost is greater than the average total cost. Or the additional student score is 90 or 100. Then what happens to the average total cost? Start to increase. So on the left side decreases, on the right side increases. So this must be the minimum point. Must be the minimum point. So that's the basic relationship between the average and the margin. Same thing for the average variable cost. Average variable cost. So the average variable cost, remember how to calculate the average variable cost. The average variable cost is the total variable cost divided by the output level. So this is the average variable cost. So the average variable cost is the total variable cost divided by the output level. But let's say if labor is the only variable cost used in the production, labor. So if the top I divided by L, the denominator I divide by L. Then the top is the total variable cost divided by L, which is basically is the wage rate. If we're assuming that everyone has the wage rate is constant for everyone. Then if you have 10 workers, if each one the wage rate is $3,000 a month, so what's the total wage? 3,000 times 10, right? Which is 30,000. And then what's the average? What is the average total variable cost? So that's 30,000. You divide it by the 10 workers. So that's 3,000. That's a wage rate. And the denominator is what? Total output divided by the number of workers. So that's the average productive rate. That's the average productive. So if we only have one cost, if labor is the only variable input, then the average variable cost basically is the wage rate divided by the average product of labor. And the same thing for the marginal cost. If labor is the only input, so the marginal cost basically is wage rate divided by the marginal product. So in short run, we have the fixed cost, we have the variable cost. And in the short term, we're assuming at least one cost is fixed. But how about in the long run? What's the definition of long run?
There's no fixed cost.
It says all costs are variable. All costs are variable. So there's no difference. There's only one cost, total cost. Because there's no difference between variable cost and fixed cost. All costs are variable. So if that's the case, you can see the long run total cost, there's only one cost. Okay? It's a function of output level. So the long run average cost is only one, right? The total long run total cost divided by the output. And the marginal cost is the changing in long run total cost versus changing in output. So long run is basically the idea of the company will have sufficient time to changing all imports. In the short run, in a simple case, we're assuming once you sign a lease for 3 years, you will not be able to move. The only thing you can change is what? The quantity of the labor imports, the number of workers you use. The physical capital, the plant size is fixed. But that's not remember the ECON? We have capital and the labor, capital labor. So in this case, we can, in the long run, basically we can change in both capital and the labor. So you can see we can expand through this expansion path. And so this one is the long run total cost, and the average cost and the marginal cost in the long run. And remember, in the long run, there's only what? One average cost. Yeah, one average. In the short run, there are two, right? In the short run, there are two average costs in the short run. The average total cost and the average variable cost. The difference between the two is the average fixed cost. But in the long run, there's only one curve because there's no fixed cost. So the long run cost basically is, see here I have some short run average total cost, but each short run average total cost is associated with a particular plant size. So let's say this is a small, this is a medium, this is large, this is extremely large. Extremely large. Now, why is this cost curve associated with extremely large output? Because you see the output levels here. If we move from left to right, you produce more and more. Right? So this short run average total cost is associated with what? A small plant size. You produce very small quantity. And this one is what? Medium. Right? And maybe this one is this is the short run average total cost associated with relatively large quantity, and this is what? Very large quantity. Very large quantity. Now, if in the extreme case, so the company has all this information, right? So basically, you can in the planning process, you can change in the parameters. Say, how about what happens if we produce the quantity is only 2? Or what happens if the output level is 3? So if output level is 2, what's the optimum structure, the plant size to produce the quantity of 2, right? If the output level is very large, 6, then what's the optimum plant size? The plant size has something to do with what? The fixed physical capital you have to commit, right? You have to commit. Okay. But let's take a look at it here. If the company is producing 2 units, yeah, 2 units, then which cost structure is the best if the company is only producing 2 units? From your understanding. Well, sure, the company can select this plant size, right? So 2 units, the cost will be here, right? Am I right? But if the company decides to use this, how about this one? Well, the cost will be here, right? It's cheaper. How about if the company decides, even though the output level is 2, if the company decides to build a large plant, the cost could be what? Here, right? It'll be huge. So which one is the best? This is the best, right? It's the best. And the same thing, how about if the company decides to produce 6 units? Then, well, sure, given this cost structure, the cost is here. But how about if the company decides to build a relatively small plant, but produce 6, then what's the cost? And it will be all the way to the top. So you can see the long run average total cost actually is the most efficient cost, but the lowest cost possible. Because the company has the ability to changing all variables of production. So that's why the long run average total cost is a shape like this. It's a U-shaped curve. U-shaped. It declines first, touch a minimum point, and start to increase. Now, what happens to this area? It's a U-shape, right? So U-shape is made up of 2 parts, right? The declining portion and also the increasing portion. So how to explain this portion? This portion is called economies of scale. Now, what is economy of scale? The more you produce, the lower the cost. Why? The more you produce, the lower the cost.
You need less items to produce, less input.
You mean it's more efficient?
Yeah, you don't need as much input as you would normally.
Shared infrastructure is part of that. You don't need one HR department for 10 items or one HR department for 1,000 items.
Exactly. If you have what, exactly, like a terminal cost, right? The terminal cost, if you serve 1 passenger, $2 million. But if you serve 10 million passengers, it will be only 50 cents. So that's why the more you produce, the lower the cost. And also the textbook mentioned other financial reasons, yeah? Because if you purchase a lot, right? Then you can enjoy those discounts from Costco, right? Costco. Black Friday is coming, right? Actually, I'm just waiting to buy all the stuff. Okay, so that's called economy scale. The specialization or specialization. That's why the more you produce, the lower the cost. But on the other hand, we also see this portion. This economy scale. What happens to this economy scale? So what is this economy scale? The average total cost starts to increase the more you produce. One explanation is if the company is getting too big. And then it's difficult to manage, right? Inefficient management. And also, if your company produce very large quantity, let's say a Boeing move to Hawaii to produce aircraft. Then what happens to, they produce a lot, right? Huge. So you need a lot of what? Labor, utilities. So you get a small island like this, then what happens to the demand for labor? It will increase, but we don't have enough labor. What happens? You have to ship. You have to exactly recruit from mainland. It costs more money, right? And how about other utilities? And demand and supply, right? If demand for electricity increase, what happens to rate increase? In other words, eventually if you produce very large quantity, it's difficult to manage, and also it may drive up what? The cost of all the inputs. So that's why eventually we may see the diseconomies of scale. That's the economic diseconomies. And economics of scope, that's a different. You can lower the cost if they produce more different kinds of products. And I have some graphs here, so you can see. And this one, this is typical, right? You have a portion of economic scale followed by this economic scale. And how about this one? So it takes a while for the economic scale to disappear, right? It takes a while. This one, very quickly. In other words, the quantity is very small, then you will run out of what? The economic scale. You will not be able to enjoy it because the cost will increase. And how about this one? It has a long range of what? Long range of economy of scale. And that's usually for like companies like utility companies. Just imagine this is a water company. The initial cost is huge, right? Because of all the utility company, electricity company. The infrastructure, the initial cost is huge. And if you only serve one consumer, one household, it will be a very high cost, right? But the more you produce, the lower the cost. So that's why you can only see one utility company in Hawaii, basically. A PECO, right? The Board of Water Supply. But why not two water companies? Two electricity companies. Competition is good for consumers, right? Why not?
Depends on who owns the channels.
Pardon?
Channels of distribution, if they're owned by one company, then the others can't.
But let's say if you decide to have a new electricity company in Hawaii, you have $100 billion, so you decide to do something in Hawaii. You talk to the governor, right? You're going to have a new electricity company to benefit the people in Hawaii.
Well,
But you will not get to the permit. You know why? You know why?
because, I mean, if you have already an existing company, the existing company running, you have solar customers, you have to introduce the second company, then, I mean, you're not going to have as many customers as the other ones, and then what happens with the fixed cost? It's not going to go down. It's going to be really high, and it's not going to be profitable.
Well, and if we assume that he has enough marketing money to attract at least a half, so let's say the two companies share the customer base, and then actually now, see, if this company is a monopoly, it serves 1.4 million people in Hawaii. The cost is here, right? The cost is here. But now, if you allow for competition, so this company can only serve 700,000 people. What happens to the average solar cost? It increases.
So it's not an attractive, profitable option.
Exactly.
Company.
Exactly. So from a social point of view, one company is better than two companies in this particular. Because of what? The large, economic scale. So that's why the government will not allow. But at the same time, the government will regulate this company, right? For the HECO to increase any rate, the HECO has to get approval from the government. And also there's a learning curve, right? If you purchase your furniture from City Mill or whatever, but in the United States they come with the boxes, right? You have to put everything together by yourself, right? So if you let's say you purchase 10 desks. So the first desk, and you may take a very long time, because for some people, they just don't know how to read the menus, right? But once you figure out the first one, the second one, the first one, it may take you 10 hours. I mean 5 hours to figure it out. How about the second one? Maybe only less than 1 hour you can put it. So that's called a learning curve. So the average total cost will decline. And also this, the cost part, we can also do it by using calculus. Oh, sorry, was this, sorry. Use calculus, yeah. What's calculus? First, you can take the first derivative and the second derivative. So if this is given the cost function, and then, can you tell which part is the fixed cost? Total fixed cost. The D, right? Because when the quantity is equal to 0, when we produce nothing, the total cost is fixed cost. D is the fixed cost. So now we know this part is what? Average variable. Is the total variable cost. This part. And how to find average variable cost? Total variable cost divided by what? Divided by the quantity. And then how to find the output level that you will minimize the average variable cost. You will take what? The first, remember you take the first derivative set to 0. And then you have to look at the second derivative. If the second derivative is a positive number, then yes, the quantity will minimize the average variable cost. And the marginal cost is we can take a derivative with respect to the total cost. And how much to produce to minimize the marginal cost. And again, for the marginal cost, we can take the first derivative, set it equal to 0. Then the output level, you can find out. But sometimes you may have two roots here. So which one is the solution? So it depends on basically whether the second derivative is positive or negative. But probably we will go through with the questions here. I have to be for chapter. This week is Thanksgiving, right?
Yep.
So probably you don't have that much. There's a lot of homework assigned, but I don't think you have that much time to do the homework here. You'll be busy with the turkey.
If you cut the homework in half, then we'll be okay.
So this is chapter 8, yeah? Chapter 8. If you take a look at the homework assignment, problems, I have problems here. But make sure, again, not discussion questions here. The discussion questions are too easy, sorry. But the problem solving questions. Okay, so I'm trying to go over those questions here. I don't know how to how do I make this disappear? Yeah. Well, this is good. Okay, how do I make? Control Z now. Control Z. Control.
How do you make it bigger?
Yeah.
Control plus.
I know, but maybe not for this setting.
I think you
This
put
one's
it
different. And I think this one has. Oh, here. Show options. Yeah. 125. Good. Okay, good. Okay. So we'll take a look at So hopefully by the time class is over, you're also done with your homework. I'll try to go over the homework in class. So Kevin, salary is $60,000, but is contemplating setting up his own business practice. He estimates the rent will be $100,000 per year. A legal secretary to $20,000, or $10,000, $20,000. And what else? Oh, gee, what happens?
I just need to know the explicit cost.
Hold on, wait a second. What did I do? Okay. Oh, I shouldn't do that again. But there's a way to get rid of this
Yeah,
part.
you can just put your mouse over there and you move it. The border, you can put your mouse on the border
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah.
and then move it.
You sure?
Oh.
I think you just click on the orange,
This one?
Yeah, that
yeah,
one.
click on that, yeah.
Wow.
This is the yuzu one, whatever you call it.
Okay, cool. Oh, but not this one. Then how do I? Oh, wait a second. Okay, let's make it a little bit smaller. Yeah,
Yeah, just put
we're
it
too ambitious. Oh no, 125 is.
That's good right there.
Okay, just 100. Yeah, 100. Okay. You have the book, right? Sir? Okay. And renting, the rent is $15,000. And the utilities, telephone, electricity is $5,000.
Wasn't this on Friday?
The revenue for this year will be $100,000. So he's wondering what he should do, right? Either work for the company, making $60,000, or whether he should start his own business.
Oh, that's.
So now, it's part A is how much, what are the express costs, and also and the accounting cost, yeah, accounting cost, the implicit cost, the economic cost. So basically, for part A, hold on.
This is revenue.
That's question one, yeah? So for part A, the explicit cost is what? Is equal to $10,000 plus $20,000. Right? That's the separation. Plus the 1,500?
15,000.
1,500, yeah? Or 15,000.
Yeah, 15,000 for the.
And the plus 5,000, that's the
yeah.
the utilities.
Mhm.
So the total is $50,000. So that's the express cost.
Yeah.
Explicit cost. And part of B, what is the accounting cost? The accounting cost is equal to what?
50.
The explicit cost. So which is equal to $50,000. And how about economic cost? Economic cost is what? The total of what? Explicit cost plus what? Implicit cost. Do I have the implicit cost here?
Yeah.
The implicit cost basically is, so the explicit cost, according to our calculation, is $50,000. And what about implicit cost? $60,000. So that's the foregone salary, right? He could have worked for him, for other people. So the total economic cost is much greater than the accounting cost. So that's $110,000. That's $110,000. So part C, we can calculate what? What is the economic accounting profit?
50K.
accounting profit is what? Total revenue according to the question is $100,000. And minus what? The accounting cost, which is the explicit cost, minus $50,000. So that's $50,000. Yeah. That's the accounting profit. And how about economic profit? In this case, the economic profit is a negative number. Why? $100,000 minus what? The economic cost, which is $110,000. So that's negative $10,000. So in other words, actually, in this case, according to the economic profit, he would be better off to work for other companies. Right? He would be better off to work for other companies. Because if he runs his own business, the net profit is $10,000. So the key here is in economics, the economic cost, it includes the implicit cost. Okay. So that's for question 1. For question 2, you don't have to. For question you don't have to do this part. Plot all the schedules. It takes time to draw those curves. But given those numbers, you're asked to calculate what? You're asked to calculate the total fixed cost, total variable cost, average fixed or average variable cost, average total cost, and marginal cost.
So don't do B?
No need to B.
Okay.
B is basically plot all the curves. So so the easiest way is we can start with question 2. Yeah. The easiest way was we can start with the table. Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, 1, 2, 3. So that's the total cost. Yeah, the total cost. So we can actually construct a table. We have a quantity here. I probably would put a total fixed cost in this column, even though I don't have this number. Then I put total cost here. So according to the question, those are given 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those are given, right? We have the total cost number, which is what? 30, 50, 60, what? 81?
Yeah.
No.
Yes.
81, 118, and 180. Now, we needed to finish what? So we have, total fixed cost. Can I put a total variable cost in between? Sorry. And then we also need a what? Average fixed cost, average variable cost, average total cost, and marginal cost. But given this number, do we know the total fixed cost? What's the number? So why? If you produce nothing, the total cost is total fixed. So I put a 30 here, 30 here, 30 here. So once I know the total fixed cost, and also the total fixed cost, so I can figure out the total variable cost. You take a difference between the two. So if you produce nothing, that's total variable cost 0. This one is 20, right? This one is 30. This one is 51. This one is what?
68.
No,
88.
88. And this one is 150. So now once we have a total fixed cost, and we can figure out at the average cost, right? The average cost. So average fixed cost is 30 divided by 1, that's 30. 30 divided by 2 is 15. 30 by 3 is 10. 30 divided by 4 is 7.5. And 30 divided by 5 is 6. That's the average fixed cost. And how about average variable cost? Total variable cost divided by the quantity. Right? 20 divided by 1 is 20. 30 divided by 2 is, this is also 15. 51 divided by 3 is 17. 17. 8 divided by 22. Wow, those are good numbers. 150 divided by that's 30. Yeah, that's 30. Then how about average total cost? There are two ways to calculate. You can use the total cost divided by the quantity, or you can just add what? Average fixed cost and variable cost together. So that's 50, that's 30, that's 27, that's 29.5, and this one is 36. Okay? And the marginal cost is, we take a difference, yeah?
20 divided by 1.
We take a difference. If you produce nothing, the total cost is 30. If you produce 1 unit, the total cost is 50. So that's, the marginal cost is 20. Yeah? And the marginal cost is 10. Marginal cost is 21. Marginal cost is 37. And marginal cost is what? 62. But the key here is what? You find the total fixed cost. You find the total fixed cost. Yeah, I think, hold on. Part of, oh. Good. How come it didn't show up? Hold on. Initial. Good. Okay. So this is for question 1 and question 2 is clear. Okay. And also, now let's go back to this part. This part has something to do with, for a company, you have the fixed cost. Well, imagine if you lease a Waikiki, the space maybe $20,000 per month. But if you lease a space in Kapolei or Schofield, maybe $400. Yeah, $400. Then a lot of times you have to figure out like how much you have to produce to be break even. So we have this formula that we can use. Now what is a break even? Break even means what? The total revenue made covers the total cost. Total cost. Total cost we know that's total. We have total fixed cost plus total variable cost. But we're assuming that we know the average variable cost per unit. So how to calculate the total cost? Total variable cost. Well, let's say our class midterm exam, the average score is 80. And we have 20 students. What's the total score? 80 is the average. We have 20 students. That's the SAT question, right? The 80 times 20, right? Average times the number of that's the total is 1,600. Same thing here. If we know the average variable cost per unit, and we times the quantity produced, this will give us what? Total variable cost. Okay. So what is break even? Total revenue covers what? The total cost. And the total revenue is price times the quantity. If you sell ice cream cones, at the end of the day, how to calculate the total revenue? The number of units sold times the price per unit. So P times Q. Then if we do some manipulation, you will find the break-even point is Q is equal to fixed cost, total fixed cost, divided by what? Price minus average variable cost per unit. Okay. And this is called contribution margin. The denominator is called contribution margin. So you can see that the break-even quantity has a lot to do with what? The contribution margin, which is the difference between the price you charge and for the product and also the average variable cost per unit. Which location, the total fixed cost. It's $20,000 in Waikiki or $400 in Schofield. Or maybe even $200 in Waianae. So if you run a large place, of course, you see the problem here, you have to produce very large quantity to be able to be break even.
Or you check the prices.
Yeah. And also, so a related question is called, so if you use, if you rent a large place, that's called operating leverage. Operating leverage. Now, if you rent a large place, what are the advantages? Disadvantages? Risk, right? Just imagine if there's no business. Every month you still have to pay $20,000. That's a lot of money. But on the other hand, what are the advantages? If you have the potential, right? If the business is good, you can make a lot of money, right? Just imagine those Waikiki stores. The traffic is very busy, right? It's very busy. You can make a lot of money if business is good. So one way to measure the degree of operating leverage, that's the amount of fixed cost, operating cost using in business, we use it's called DOL, degree of leverage. And degree of leverage basically is a measurement of what? The sensitivity of the profit to what? Changing in output level. If you have run a small place, you will not be able to make that much money. But you will not lose that much money either. Just imagine $400 a lease payment. Do you care? Not really. But how about $40,000 lease payment a month? Yes. It will be very sensitive to the business condition. So we should expect what? The DOL, degree of operating leverage, will be high for what? Leveraged company. Now what is a leveraged company? The company leased a large space in Waikiki. A large amount of fixed cost commitment. And the alternative, well, sure, we can find out if the company produces 100 units, what's the profit level, and then we can take a look at how about if the company produces 200 units, what's the profit level. Then we can figure out the percentage change. We can figure out the degree of operating leverage. The alternative formula, we have this one. This is actually the top. What is Q times P? Total revenue, right? So actually, this formula is actually it's pretty easy. It's equal to. So I'm going to erase this part here. So.
It's right there by the board.
Oh, thanks. So I tried to cover all those questions in class. So it will be you have some time for the family, right? Or for turkey. But turkey probably will be sad. You have time to kill the turkey. Degree of operating leverage, basically Q times C is total revenue. Q times average variable cost is total variable. Divided by total revenue minus total variable cost minus total. That's the alternative formula. But it depends on which information we know, right? If we know the total revenue, total cost, total variable cost, we can just use this one. But if we know the output level, price per unit, average variable cost per unit, then we can use this one. So two different alternative formulas. Okay. So now let's take a look at, I think I have another homework assignment, which is, I believe it's question 13, yeah?
Yeah,
Wow, there's a lot of questions. Hold on.
there's 4 in each
Whoa, boy.
chapter.
Okay. Question 13. Okay, two companies, that's here. Two companies in the same industry. the the price is $10 per unit. For the one company, the first company is $100 total fixed cost. Second company is what? $300. So obviously the second company is more leveraged, right? More leveraged. And the first company is average variable cost is $6. Second company is $3.33. Can anyone tell me why the average variable cost is lower for the second company? It might be the case the fixed cost the company may purchase a large machinery, so you don't have to use that many people. That's what average variable cost is lower. Then determine the break-even point for each company. Okay. And why is the break-even output of the second furnace larger than the first? Of course, the total fixed cost is much larger, right? Much larger. And B, find the DOL for each firm at quantity 60 and quantity 70. So why is the degree of operating leverage greater for the second than the first? Well, the second first leverage firm, right? Leverage. And then why is the degree of operating leverage greater at 60 than at 70? Well, sometimes if you produce a very large quantity, if you already produce at a very large quantity, your upside potential is limited. That's true, right? That's true. So that's why when the company increases, when the output increases, actually the degree of operating leverage decreases. So we'll take a look at the calculation here. So I was say the first company and the second company, right? How about first company we use A, second company we use B. Okay. So for the first company, question 13, part A. So QA, the break-even point, is equal to what? The total fixed cost divided by price minus the average variable cost per unit. So for the first company, it's 100 divided by 10 minus 6, so it's 25. So the company has to produce 25 units. For the second company, I use TFC prime P minus average variable cost of prime. Okay, that's the notation used in the question. So that's $300. The price is the same, but the variable cost is much lower, 3.33. So I come up with 45. Yeah. So, of course, the second company, the break-even point for second company is great. Okay. Part B, let's calculate if quantity is equal to 60. Let's figure out what is the degree of operating leverage for the first company. And for the first company, remember what's the formula? That's, I just read the formula one more time. Q times P minus ABC divided by Q times P minus ABC minus the total fixed cost. So for the first company, the output level is 60, right? 60. And then times $10 minus 6 divided by 60 times $10 minus 6. My total fixed cost is $100. So you will find that the degree of operating leverage is 1.71. Now, 1.71 means what? If you increase the output by 1%, the profit will change by 1.71%. That's the degree of operating. And for the second company, we should expect the degree of operating leverage is much larger, much larger. So the number, same formula, but different numbers. 60 is the same, yeah? 10 minus 3.33 divided by 60 times 10 minus 3.33, and a minus, what, 300. So you will find that the degree of operating leverage is 4. So it's much larger. The question also asks you to calculate, okay, if quantity is 70, yeah, so we just replace 70. Now what is the degree of operating leverage for company A? And what is the degree of operating leverage for company B, the second company? For the second company, for the first company it's 1.56, and for the second company it's 2.8. So now you can see what happens to the operating leverage, the degree of operating leverage at different output levels. It's relatively smaller, becomes smaller. Oh, what happened to the computer? Okay. And we have one more question. There's so many questions. It's in appendix, yeah, appendix. Now how do I call back the, it's here. Appendix, here, hold on, chapter 4, no, chapter 3 here, costs, appendix question, where's the appendix question? You see the appendix question? Yeah. Okay. Okay, so the question is this one. Hold on. Is this one? Oh, that's next. Given this function, yeah, and find the total variable cost, average variable cost, and the marginal cost function. Second, the level of output at which the average variable cost and marginal cost are minimum. And find the average variable cost and marginal cost for the level output at which the average variable cost is minimum. So there's several different parts, but it actually is pretty easy question. So do you mind if I erase this part? Okay, so this is appendix question 1, yeah? That's the last question. So the total cost is equal to $100 plus 60Q minus 12Q squared. Oh boy, do we have two questions, two assignments for appendix 1 and 2?
No,
just one.
Just appendix.
Just one?
Just one.
Just the first one?
This is the first one.
Not the second one?
Mm-hmm.
You sure?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, so what is the, can we tell what is the total fixed cost to come out? Total fixed cost?
100.
100, okay. What is the total variable cost?
60 plus 60 minus 12 plus 1.
Okay.
Okay.
And can we find the average variable cost? How? Total variable cost divided by output level. So this one, 60 divided by Q is 60, minus 12Q plus Q squared. Q squared. That's the average variable cost. Average variable cost. Okay. And how about the marginal cost? What is marginal cost? Remember? We take the derivative of total cost with respect to what? Q. Total cost. So if you take the first derivative, what happens to 100? It disappears, but it's a constant. 60Q is 60, right? 60. Minus 12Q squared is what? Minus 24Q Q, right? Am I right? Yeah. And plus what? 3Q squared. So that's the marginal cost. So we have marginal cost, average variable cost, total variable cost, and total fixed cost. So we're done with part A. Yeah? Part B. So this is part A. Yeah? Part B. We're tasked to find what's the minimum of the average variable cost. How to do it? Well, we have the average variable cost. We'll take the first derivative and set to 0. This is how we find the optimal output level. Remember, that's our solution. If you're trying to find what is the minimum for average variable cost, then you take a derivative with respect to quantity, you set to equal 0. So the average variable cost, dq, so average variable cost with respect to q, 60 disappear, minus 12q is minus 12, plus 2q. You set it equals 0. You set it equals 0. And then we find the quantity is equal to what? 6. And also, can we take the second derivative? Yes. Second derivative is we'll take the derivative again based on this one. It's equal to what? Equal to 2, which is greater than 0. If it's greater than 0, that means what? Means this one, yes, this is the minimum. Yeah, this is the minimum. Any questions? So to find, again, given the average variable cost, to find what's the minimum, you just take a derivative, set equal to 0. Same thing for part B, for the marginal cost. For the marginal cost, what's the minimum point of the marginal cost? You set the marginal cost with respect to quantity. Then 60 disappears, so that's minus 24 plus what? 6q. You set equal to 0. Q is equal to 4. And then if we take a look at, we can also take a second derivative. Yes, this is the first derivative. We take a second derivative with respect to q. So that's 6. It's greater than 0. So that's a proof this is the minimum. And the last part of the question is asking you what's the level of the marginal cost and the average variable cost when the average variable cost is at its minimum. So at which output level, so maybe that's part of, or I can say part C here, or last part. So at which output level, so the question is asking you what's the relationship between average variable cost and the marginal cost when average variable cost is at its minimum, if you read the question. Well, according to our calculation, if Q equal to 6, yeah? If Q equal to 6, then the average variable cost is at its minimum, right? It's at its minimum. So what's the average variable cost if the output level is 6? We can calculate, right? We have this function. So average variable is 60 minus 12q plus q squared, which replaces the q with 6. 60 minus 12 times 6 plus 6 squared. Then you will find average variable cost. Hold on. Average variable cost is equal to 24. And how about the marginal cost? You will find the marginal cost is also equal to 24. Actually, you don't have to do any calculation. You know why? Remember the curve? The average variable cost, the marginal cost curve passes through the minimum point of average variable cost. So when the average variable cost is at its minimum, the average variable cost is the same as the marginal cost. So that's the conclusion. Okay. Let's take a break. Now take a look at the next chapter. So you sure you wouldn't have a question? Oh, okay.